And welcome back to OpenLine tonight. We are talking about the situation that's been going on at Fort Negley and really the homeless situation across Nashville. What needs to be done? What are the solutions? What really can make a difference? We were talking in the commercial break. There's been a lot of planning, a lot of let's do this, let's do that, but we're still here. So let's talk about, let's go back to August, September when this really started to pick up steam, at least from the media point of view, and that was supposed to be the deadline. And then the mayor came in and said, hang on, let's back up the train a little bit. Let's really look at this and try to get people moved on to permanent housing. What happened? Explain the process.
Well, a number of the cooperating agencies in House Nashville, including Open Table Nashville, went out and surveyed people and started the housing paperwork with them. And then the deadline came, and Megan Barry, thankfully, saw that there was a need for compassion and said, well, let's wait and let's study this more. But by March, when the question came up seriously again about an April deadline, many of the people who had previously been surveyed had moved on, either into housing through the work that we'd done or into with friends, whatever. Most people don't want to be in the camp. Most people want permanent, stable housing. And so when they surveyed again in March, they discovered that many of the 50 people that were there had not actually started their housing paperwork. And so we brought out agencies again to try to find ways to get them into some sort of permanent supportive housing. But as we said, that takes time.
It does
there was
take time, yeah.
also an encampments task force that had begun, and Lindsay was on that.
Yeah, the efforts that the city has made have been great, but until we address the housing situation, right, this isn't going to stop. The camps aren't going to stop growing. So the encampment task force has been really interesting. We've worked on recommendations for unauthorized camps and authorized camps for the city, and that will kind of finish up in about 2 weeks. So we're hoping the city will take some of those recommendations and implement them. But in the meantime, we're still dealing with the Fort Negley question.
Sure.
And our other campsites across the city are fearful as well.
Yeah, because you mentioned, I think, 200 campsites across just Davidson County.
We know of over 200 homeless encampments in Davidson County, and those, it can range from one person with a shanty to 20 people along the tracks to 40 to 50 people in the woods. So
why was the spotlight turned on Fort Negley?
I think that there were plans that the Park Service was developing for use of the park along with the Adventure Science Center. But I also think it's a part of the process of trying to push people who are unhoused out of central downtown. There are large business developments planned for the area around the Mission. And I think they are concerned, about there being the presence of a large number of people who are experiencing homelessness, camping,
I don't want
so
this in
close.
my backyard.
Which, it's funny because it's something that shocked me when I started doing this work. You discover that they're everywhere in the city. It's impossible to think, not in my backyard, because once you start seeing them, once you start realizing where they are, they're in everybody's backyard.
Let's take a quick pause. Let's talk to Annie. She's on the phone. Annie, thank you for calling into OpenLine. What's your comment or question?
I heard on the TV the other day where they're going to, I think if I remember right, they was going to have 14 acres for a dog park. Why in the world can't you put them homeless people on that instead of the dogs?
Okay, what are your thoughts on this?
Annie, you're great. We see that too, right? I think one of the things that's so hard is that we see dogs being prioritized, and we see entertainment being prioritized, and we see luxury condos and boutique hotels being prioritized. But for the people of our city that make Nashville it gives Nashville their vitality. Our workers who build the city, as I think Steve was saying earlier, what are we doing with them? We're just creating this city where none of us can actually live.
Right.
We're going to be pushed out next. This is a huge issue.
It's often said by the Parks Department that their purpose is recreation. And so we spend millions on golf courses, swimming pools, tennis courts, mountain bike paths, dog parks, for people who have money who need a couple of hours off. But for people who are experiencing deep, severe poverty, we say, sorry, the parks are not going to be, it's not a use of the parks for you except for you to come in briefly during the day and then you have to leave. which is a strange sort of comment in a city I think as compassionate as Nashville.
Yeah, there is a lot of compassion here. So it does, you know, it makes you stop and scratch your head and say, why can't we find a better way? There has to be a better way.
These people are recreating their lives at their...
That's recreation too. But I think we've been blinded by some of the glitter, right? And our priorities are off. And as a city, we have to come together and say, we've got to get back on track. And that means doing this plan for affordable housing. That means opening up spaces for people to live. So I hope that we will get our priorities back on that. But the dog park is a great example, right?
You probably want to scream at your TV when we're reporting that. Wait a second, another dog park. Yeah, no. Let's talk to Richard. He's on the line. Richard, thanks for being with us.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I've been a resident for Nashville quite some time, and a lot of years. I've been homeless several of those years. I'm familiar with the problem, although I do have housing now. I watched the last two tax increases, property taxes in Nashville, of course, double digits. Well, they claimed this was funds going into education. It was all went into law enforcement, whereas the law enforcement in turn declared war on the homeless, the very people that were set out by these high taxations. Some politicians say, well, we need to increase more taxes to get the homeless. Already the elderly and disabled, I could have bought a house, but I couldn't afford to pay the taxes. Taxes came out more than my rent would be.
Wow.
Yeah.
People, elderly families, elderly people, fixed incomes, they were just set out on the street with either the homes foreclosed through bank closures or tax liens. These people just sat with the last possessions set out on the street. So there's going to be a lot more homeless because there's another tax increase coming. And if you notice, the last increase was almost directly proportional to the amount of increase in homelessness. What's the next tax increase? And you're going to see the homeless population go up even greater.
And that's what, Samuel, you were referencing. Richard, thank you for your call and thank you for the points that you made. This is really at least two-part problem. You have the folks who are in the encampments now that really need to find better housing. We need to get them there. But again, as the taxes go up, as the rent goes up, more people are coming into this scenario.
Right.
People don't realize 1/5 of Nashville is living in deep poverty.
1/5.
1/5, 129,000 people, and it's gone up dramatically since 2000. But in the meantime, the city has built, beautiful buildings, luxury condos, boutique hotels, stadiums with tax dollars. They use tax increment financing for it, essentially giving a tax break to wealthy developers to do that. But they've spent very little local money on affordable housing.
You were saying we need about 20,000 units, housing units, right, of affordable housing units.
And that's the low income.
Are we talking Section 8? We need 20,000 Section 8 units?
Section 8 is kind of addresses the 0 to 30%, the super lowest of the low.
Okay.
But we're extending that to the working poor too. And in addition to the 20,000 units for low-income folks that we need, experts are also saying we need about 20,000 units of workforce housing. So this is where some of your teachers and firefighters and community servants come in.
How many do we have right now?
That's a really good question. Not enough.
Not enough, clearly.
And every week we're seeing apartment complexes that were affordable, bought out. All the tenants either
Pushed
evicted or like Hal Gardens raised, 200% or 2 times the rent now. So this is definitely an epidemic, and it's just getting worse. We've got to find some checks and balances in the system.
You mentioned there are other cities who are having these problems and tackling them the right way. What are they doing, and what are those cities?
Definitely. Do you want to speak to that?
Well, Seattle, for example, has established a number of authorized encampments as well as several parking lot areas for people, because many people live out of their cars before they actually become literally street homeless. And so safe places for people to go and to be. And we think that authorized encampments would be a reasonable step. But also the end of criminalization is important. Cities like Miami found that when they were trying to push people on the street out of downtown, that they ended up in federal court. The court determined that it was unconstitutional to push people out of places to sleep when there was no place for them to go. And so you can't, they insisted, and in fact, there was a money damage settlement.
Wow.
The U.S. Justice Department has also stated that it's unconstitutional and cruel to push people out when there's no place to go. So we believe ending criminalization is a huge part of the right thing to do.
And just a few affordable housing solutions, right? A lot of similar sized cities have a way more funding for their housing trust funds than we do. And while we appreciate the $10 million boost that Mayor Berry gave, we still are saying it's not enough. We're giving developers that plus in tax increment financing for a luxury condo
Right.
On 5th and Church. So this is not enough. Community land trust, where land can be frozen as affordable, in some ways like owned collectively by different groups and nonprofits and people. We are seeing a lot of Section 8 landlords leave the voucher program right now, and that's been a really hard situation. Almost a third of the vouchers issued last year to people weren't used because people couldn't find places. So we're wanting incentives for Section 8 landlords. We could talk all day and bore you
do
to
they leave the program just because they can make more money?
They
and
can make more
Absolutely.
money
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
fair market rent, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The
That
James
just makes
Robertson,
sense.
for example, sold to a developer who planned to turn it into a more high-priced set of condos, and it still sits empty, having pushed over 100 low-income residents out.
Wow.
And this is repeating itself over and over throughout the city.
You know, it's something that that we during the commercial breaks we talk up here on the anchor desk, and we do all these stories about another condos coming, and this is what they're charging for, and it's like, who's filling this and what do they do and are they full? Well, I mean, we ask those things. I mean,
Right.
how many rich people are there in the city to fill all these condos? It's crazy when you start thinking about it, and then when you think on the flip side, it's extremely sad. Where did the working folks go?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. There are 14,000 vouchers, people searching for vouchers at the moment. They're on the waiting list. So, that at least that many of those families, 35% of the people who are in poverty are children. We sometimes cite the number of people that are homeless as being about 2,300. There are 3,000 children alone in the schools who are homeless. We believe the number is closer to 15,000, more than 15,000 people experiencing homelessness here.
It breaks my heart when you talk about the kids.
Yeah.
And
so
it just
it's-
really brings it home.
Yeah.
They're children that are growing up this way.
Yeah. And they're living doubled up in seedy hotels
Yeah.
on Dickerson Pike, on Trinity Lane, on Murfreesboro. This is their home where they're going to school from. So that's the invisible part. A lot of people say, well, there's only, 2,300 on the unhoused list.
Right.
But the other people that are just invisible to all of us
Yeah.
are wasting away in slums while we're having our glitter buildings. So this
Okay.
is a moral issue.
For sure. On that note, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have so much more to discuss. We are open to taking your comments and questions too. It is your chance to ask these folks who know the situation better than anybody else how to solve it. So stick around.